back. You're watching the India development debate with me, Nayantara Rai in New Delhi. Are you living on a jet plane? You should be worried. The mess is getting worse. Flights cancellations, passengers stranded, not just in India, but overseas across Europe, Singapore, Hong Kong. And it's official, Jet has suspended all international operations till Monday. Salaries have not been paid since December. The perils of Jet Airways are far from over. And as the crisis deepens, during elections, the Prime Minister's office called for an urgent meeting to take stock of the situation. The first day of elections was just yesterday. Can the government afford the visuals that you're seeing of today's on the screen? The Aviation Ministry has asked Jet to get its act together to minimize the pain to passengers. But what can Jet do? It doesn't even have the money to pay its salaries. It's struggling to fuel its planes. It's once again going back to the banks and asking for a lifeline. This is what else we're going to be discussing today on the India development debate. Joining me, Jitendra Bhargav, the former executive director at Air India, Captain Asim, the vice president of the National Aviators Guild. We're also being joined by Ajay, the founder of liftfromalounge.com. He's been giving a lot of advice to all of those who have been stranded. But, I'll come first to you, Asim. You're representing the pilots for us here. You're part of the National Aviators Guild. It's such a messy situation. Planes are being flown by pilots, by crew, engineers are in charge who have not been paid. How is it that safety is not being considered to be an issue over here? How is someone who's worried about paying the next installment, the next home loan, a car loan, the kids' education, is being allowed to ferry passengers in the air?
That's right, Nayantara, and these are genuine issues. We have been highlighting these issues for a long time. The issues are going on for the last 7 to 8 months. This crisis is on, and of course, people are under a lot of stress. It's not an ideal situation to be in the cockpit. We have said this earlier, and I would like to once again repeat this. What surprises me is that we were promised a huge aid of 1,500 crores. I don't see that coming. I do not know how the employees are supposed to survive without being paid, and as of now we don't even have enough aeroplanes. So most of the pilots are sitting at home.
Okay, most of the pilots are sitting at home, and that too at a time when other carriers are looking for pilots. And some of the lucky ones have, of course, got jobs at Indigo. We have been talking about that. Ajay, let me come to you. And I want to talk about the consumers. Of course, safety is paramount, and that's why I went to Asim first. Do you really want to be flown by a pilot who's worried about the next EMI installment? Having said that, you've been writing a lot of columns. That's also why we got you here on ET Now. What's your advice to those that have miles under jet privilege? What's your advice to those that are, stranded in airports? What are they supposed to do? And, if anybody's watching us on YouTube overseas, you've got cases of Indians who are stranded in Brussels, in London, in Singapore, in Hong Kong with no transit visas.
Hi, Nayantara. Well, I guess first coming to the point of people who have been stranded, there are two ways of looking at this. There are people who were booked on Jet Airways and stranded by Jet Airways abroad. I don't have a solution for those people at this point of time. I think they have to basically either wait for another airline to offer them distress fares, or they basically have to buy a full ticket back home. But in case of the people who were booked, let's say, by one of their codeshare partners like KLM, Air France, or Delta or Virgin Atlantic, those people have better resolution, because in this case, most of those carriers already operate to India, so they can just transfer their passengers who are supposed to fly on Jet Airways to their own flights and bring them to India. So that there's less disruption in those cases as compared to the ones where Jet Airways was the operating carrier. Coming to the part about JP Miles, I think that's still, and for the moment, there's not much use of those JP Miles apart in terms of making redemption bookings. But Jet Privilege is a separate company, part owned by Jet Airways, part owned by Etihad. So I am hoping personally as well, as a huge as a person who has a lot of JP miles, basically, that they're going to be able to create a new value proposition. In fact, Jet Privilege recently launched the ability for you to buy tickets on other airlines with JP miles as well. So that's one use that they have. But I'm hoping also that the airline comes back and you're able to redeem your JP miles on Jet Airways whenever that's possible again.
You know, it's sometimes nice to listen to a very optimistic voice at the 9 p.m. debates. You don't really get to do that. But Jitendra Bhargav, what Ajay is saying, is it far too optimistic? Is it realistic? You know, JP Maya, Jet Privilege is owned by the two equity partners who cannot stand each other. That's one of the big reasons why we are in this horrible mess as far as Jet Airways goes. Everybody knows how bad the fallout was between Etihad and the founder Naresh Goyal. So unless you have an airline, what use is it of having all of these miles? It's no longer the cash king as one had thought that could rescue Jet Airways as well. Do you think that perhaps Ajay is being far too optimistic, and would your suggestion and advice be different?
Well, now I think it's a difficult proposition. The passengers or those who are holding these mileage points should have encashed 3, 4, 5 months ago, when everybody knew Jet Airways is facing a crisis and their flights are not going to be operated after a while. They should have encashed it. And even the other thing is to redeem these JP miles on other allied franchises that Jet Airways has. Now, that's one way of doing it. But one point that I must clarify is, because the representative from Energy made up that point, that the banks had promised 1,500 crores and that hasn't been infused, and therefore it has led to cancellation and grounding on more and more flights, with the result as of today you have very, very limited number of flights in operation. The reality is that the banks cannot infuse funds at this juncture. They had given on the premise on the 23rd of May, when Naresh Goyal stepped down under the RBI circular, they would have gone ahead and in the meantime found, but with the restructuring having gone back to the status earlier, banks are no longer holding 51% equity at this juncture. So how on earth can they put in money? They'll be questioned. So that's one part which needs to be clarified, because banks are coming under criticism, but nobody is holding Naresh Goyal responsible for having delayed the inevitable stepping down. Had he done it 4 or 5 months ago, the process could have been initiated much earlier. So I have been seeing on the Twitter, etc., that Naresh Goyal being safeguarded, silence being maintained.
I've got to say it over there. I've got to say this over there. The banks are equally, how can the banks not be equally blamed? They knew back in October how bad the situation was. They were hoping that Etihad would be life savior. They didn't see that Etihad has $4 billion in the last 3 years. They had the collateral. They didn't use it.
Let's look at it. Banks would have been guilty of not having infused the committed funds had they continued to maintain that 51% equity under the restructuring plan. But we all know that after the RBI circular of February 12th was quashed by the Supreme Court, they do not hold that equity. So if they were to put in money and question, as I've been very often saying it, okay, you can get this money put in, but unless you have a resolution to Jet Airways problems, what happens 3 months from now? Will you make the banks pay again? Now, lenders have got into a corner. They're trying to salvage the airline, which should have been the responsibility of the promoter. Now, it's an unfortunate part that the Jet Airways got into a mess. We all want Jet Airways to be salvaged. Something needs to be done, and I'm glad that today, of course, the 5 expressions of interest that have come in, it should kind of find some solution. And even if there are 1 or 2 which are meaningful ones, the banks should fast track it rather than wait till the end of the month and try and get funding as far as, because you see, you will get this to put this 100
Let's see, they're even worth the paper they're on. You know, the problem is we don't even, you know, Jitendra Bhargav, the problem is we don't even know if these expression of interest are worth the paper they're on, simply because they're not binding. Air India received 17 of them. What happened? No final bidder.
I said of
I'm
the
going to come back to that point. I'm going to come back to this point.
I said of the 5 to said it, that even if 2 of them are worthwhile, I'm also meaning the same thing. It does not mean that 5 EOIs having been received by the SBI caps, that all of them would be worthy of consideration. It's going to take time, but let's be optimistic, not be totally pessimistic.
So, you know, yeah, let's hope for reasonable optimism. Let's call it that, Ajay and Mr. Bhargav. If I can come back to Asim now. Give us a sense of how bad the situation is. Like, for example, we know about the dharnas. We know about how the pilots have threatened to sue the CEO, Vinay Dubey, his response, what Jet has been saying. We saw what happened today across the airports as well. Now, the flip side is the more time a pilot spends home, that's less that the pilot is flying, and that also impacts his future or her future going forward. Can you give us a sense of, or do you have the data of how many pilots were there at Jet, how many there are today, how many have been able to get employment at other airlines? How bad is the situation?
That's right, Nayantara. The issue is that, yes, of course, sitting at home is actually more depressing and more frustrating for everyone. We would rather be flying than to sit at home. We had around 1,800 pilots, and out of 1,800 pilots, as of now, our current strength is about 1,450 pilots. There are jobs available. Pilots are applying to a lot of other airlines, and they are moving ahead. People who cannot wait are definitely applying and are moving on. But however, there are many people who are still optimistic and who still feel that there is a chance for Jet Airways, and that Jet Airways can be revived. And if the government has the will, everything is possible. And I heard Mr. Bhargav say that because SBI now cannot take 51%. So that's why the 1,500 crores is not possible, but there has to be a way, because this is not, the airline is not going to survive like this. If there is no money, then we would rather shut shop tomorrow. Why are we even letting this airline continue? Because anyways, all international operations are stopped. We have hardly about 7 to 8 aeroplanes which are flying, and we don't know how long that will continue. There is no money to pay for fuel, forget about salaries. So I don't know how long this is going to continue. And as far as pilots are concerned, yes,
these are very
there are
important
jobs
points
available.
That have
but
been...
as far as pilots are concerned, yes, there are jobs available. But
Okay, you made some very pertinent points. I want to go to Ajay with this. What totally baffles me, Ajay, is that this situation is getting worse day by day. In December 2018, Jet had 119 planes. Now the figures are about 10, 11. So it's pretty much an airline in shutdown mode. Why is the DGCA not suspending the advance bookings? Why are we allowing this situation to get even worse? Why is someone today still allowed to buy a flight on Jet Airways? Then they want their money back. There's no money for refunding. This is all just becoming messier and messier. I just cannot understand, why is it that the advance bookings is still allowed? Is there a law on this? Is it about time we get a law? And is there any global precedent?
So I really don't have an answer for you for why advance bookings are still being allowed. In fact, bookings are being put out on the website for, I think, a period till the end of this year at this point of time. But we really don't know if those flights will operate or not. Coming to the part of why did DGCA not do anything, I think perhaps DGCA has directives from the ministry or from somewhere else to take this as a different case as compared to what happened when SpiceJet was undergoing a grounding of almost all their planes. Coming to the and as for global precedents, I think there is no global precedent really of stopping an airline from taking bookings because of this. Apart from SpiceJet itself, which happened a few years ago. In fact, a few weeks ago when Huawei was collapsed, till the night before they really grounded all operations, they were still selling tickets for forward dates. But at this point of time, then it's the customer who needs to decide that they will book away from Jet and perhaps book on another airline if they really want surety on their travel plans.
Before I go to Jitendra Bhargav again, I just have another point, because like we said at the start of the show, we're getting you here for advising all the viewers of ET Now, like you do in your columns, etc. Someone's got to fly, and they just have to fly, whether it's commercial, whether it's for personal reasons, holidays, whatever it is, that's their reason. How does one even get a good deal? Is it even possible today? Is anybody still coming out with discounts? Are there some websites that are offering better offers? What happens? Because airfares are just skyrocketing and have literally gone through the roof.
So I think, airfares will now go back to where they were more than a year and a half back. And you will, at least for the next few months, not be able to just decide to hop on a plane and get on the plane next morning. But value fares are still available. It's just that you will need to book them 20, 25 days out. You won't be able to get them for the next day or the day after that, because these fares are very expensive, and they are there for a purpose, because like you said, when you gotta go, you gotta go. And typically businesses are willing to pay a higher premium for last minute tickets, and they will do that. So if you are a leisure traveler, you should book ahead, maybe 20 days, 25 days out at least, to be able to get a reasonable fare. Apart from that, I think there are a lot of discounts going on with all these fare portals, with a lot of bank tie-ups that they do. You can easily get another 10 to 1500 rupees off on each passenger ticket if you book through, if you have the time basically to scour through all the websites like Make My Trip, Go Ibibo, and so on and so forth, and then find yourself the best deal. And that's I think one of the easier way to get a value deal at this point of time.
Okay, Jitendra Bhargav, you're hoping that maybe at least one or two of the bids are serious. You are an aviation expert in India. Has the government also botched up? Why is it that the DGCA is not stepping in and saying don't make a bigger mess? Why is it still allowing Jet Airways to book? Is that because there's no such law? It still has more than 5 aircraft, therefore it is still a commercial airline. But should it be doing something? And secondly, is the DGCA sleeping when it comes to pricing? How can we believe that there is no predatory pricing? Look at the airfares that exist today.
Nayantara, the reality is neither DGCA nor the Ministry of Civil Aviation has ever been proactive. They've always reacted after a crisis has loomed large. That's the tragedy. Now, Ajay made a mention of WOW Airlines shutting down a few days ago. You know what happened after that? Virgin Atlantic and a couple of other airlines started offering distressed passenger fare, which was a discounted fare. Now, there is no reason why a similar model cannot be followed, or the government taking a proactive step and nudging the other airlines and say, look, you still have 7 to 8% of your seats. You're not flying 100%. You're doing 85 to 90%. So why can't you offer these seats to distressed passengers? Let there be no exploitation of the passengers. Somebody has to be customer friendly. Unfortunate part is a bureaucracy is not kind of looking at it from the customer perspective. You very rightly said DGCA could have. They had a meeting on the 24th of March, if I remember correctly, attended by the bank, the Civil Aviation Ministry, DGCA, and the jet management, where they decided, okay, this will be the plan of operation for the next 1 month. But that was, of course, supposing on the presumption that 1,500 crores would be infused into the airline. That hasn't happened. So once they knew it that the banks are not putting in money, there was no reason, since the ministry was in the picture, that Jet Airways will not be able to add those 41 aircraft schedule, I think was worked out at that time, and another 40 to be added by the end of April. That was the plan given. Now that it will not going to happen. So the simple consequence of it is don't let passengers buy ticket. Intervene and stop it. Airline will naturally like to have revenue coming in because that would keep some kind of operations going on. But the fact is, you cannot ignore the passengers' fundamental rights. Now, you can't put them under agony. And it's not just domestic passengers.
Asim the pilot this. Let me ask Asim the pilot this. Let me ask Asim the pilot this. You're a very important stakeholder. You're representing the National Aviation Guild over here. Is that what you guys would want? Is that what you would want, that there should be no advance bookings at all, that it needs to be stopped because you're just making a bigger mess of the whole situation? Or is the view that your organization have that no, we are still an airline, Jet is still an airline, there's more than 5 airlines, it's classified as a scheduled airline, why should it not take bookings?
Well, you are right, Nayantara. If the main thing is passenger comfort, and right now the passengers are stranded, and nobody wants that. So as DGCA as a body or ministry, they should have seen this coming and they should have stopped the bookings. And yes, I agree to that. There should not be any bookings. If you feel that, if you are confident that the airline is going to survive, if you are confident that the airline is going to fly with 40, 50 aeroplanes, then yes, go ahead and take the bookings. But if not, if you're not sure about anything, then why take bookings? What happens to these passengers? This is not fair.
Okay, with that, my producer is telling me that we have to wrap up this discussion, but that seems to be the unanimous verdict. It's perhaps not very smart to buy a Jet Airways ticket at the moment if you're a gambling person and you believe that this airline will indeed take off. If any of the bidders are serious and there's a hope for revival, which everybody does. Jet is an Indian brand that, we all used to feel very proud of, India's oldest private sector airline. Let's see what happens next week. It's supposed to have the money right now to sustain about 7 to 8 planes in its fleet till Monday. No international flights, of course. We'll be back on Monday with Monday's edition of India Development Debate. Many thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.